I'm Lauren Brooks, and I'm a German professor by day. And then, by night, I'm a cat enthusiast and weightlifter and gardener, terrible gardener. In my graduate studies, I found that I had a very traditional, ethnocentric, heteronormative sort of study experience. I loved Germany when I lived there for many years and taught English in the city of Bremen. My grandmother's from Germany, so I had a very personal connection to Germany. And I just found, though, that my program of study, it bored me. It was very traditional, and I thought, this is not interesting. And if this is not interesting to me, then how will it be interesting to my students? I didn't see myself really reflected in the studies, in German studies. When I was getting my PhD, I started attending this conference called Women in German. And I remember being like, wow, it was so feminist focused. It was very much, and I was like, am I a feminist? What is a feminist? Like, do I do feminist work? And just kind of questioning the things that I did. And they had so many perspectives, feminist, queer, BIPOC perspectives. And I thought, this is so much more interesting than what I had previously been exposed to. And I wanted to kind of incorporate this into my teaching. And I was lucky that I kind of was given free, Freiraum. Like, just, I could do whatever kind of in the classes that I taught. So I got to teach intro to study of literature. And I thought, how about maybe I focus on people of color or women authors or marginalized authors, not like the typical German canon, and see how that goes. And I kind of just started doing that because I noticed, like my studies and also like German history and even what's taught in Germany, there's a big gap in the understanding. This is often, specifically the colonial history of Germany, is an underrepresented time. It's getting more and more attention. Germany has a colonial history and how that affects even citizens to today. It's often not really talked about enough. And I think one of the reasons can be Germany says they have a short colonial history compared to like the French or the British or the Portuguese or the Dutch. And because when we don't talk about that, we erase the history of people that are currently living in Germany. Because if you don't deal with the past, you can't understand the present or what the future can be, and you don't learn from it. And as we see now more than ever, it's really important to talk about these aspects to understand our current society. Not only do I find the history interesting, but also what Black Germans have contributed to German society today. And you had in the 1920s, you had like one of the first, like a civil rights movement for various figures in Germany from the colonies. Tried to have a petition to have equal rights for Black people in Germany and in the colonies and the former colonies after they lost them. That all failed. And then you had a second movement in the 1980s where you had someone from America, Audre Lorde, came to Germany and worked with Black women, and they coined the term Afro-Deutsch, Afro-German. They got to choose their own term, and I think that is so important when it comes to identity. The reason why I was interested in the University of Münster for my Fulbright is I think there was a personal reason, because I lived in Bremen before Bremen, and that was sort of near Münster. And I did look at what the German department was doing, and I did notice that there were some graduate students that were doing research in the field of Black German studies. And so I was looking, I think I Googled like Black German studies, and Münster came up because they had just done a speaker series the semester prior that was about Black German studies. So they had like for 5 or 6 weeks long, they had invited guests and authors that talked about Black German studies and what it means and what it is. And so I thought, okay, this institution is already doing something. That would be a good place to start. I would describe my time in Münster as great. Münster is a very livable city. There's more bikes than citizens there, so it was a little wild, wild west bike riding. The colleagues, though, were wonderful. I felt supported. It was nice because it was the first time ever in my career since, which was still very short, but of having an actual year to do research and to not teach. So this was the first time that I didn't have to teach. And so I really got to focus on my research or just research in general, attending conferences, giving lectures, organizing an event, working with the grad students there without having the constraint. I love teaching, but boy, does it fill up my week. And it sometimes doesn't allow me to do other things. I got to meet people in person, people that I never ever thought. So I mentioned before the Afro-Deutsch, the Afro-German movement with Audre Lorde. Audre Lorde worked with Mai Aim, a poet who died very young, whose basic dissertation was in the book Showing Our Colors or Farbe Bekennen, and this woman, Katarina Oguntoya, who's still living today. And I met her and I got to talk to her and I got to hang out with her and connect with her wife. And we both bonded about lifting because she was a power lifter in Canada. And just I felt like I could connect on people, connect with people, not just about research, but about just human things, life. And it could have never been possible if I weren't there. So being a Fulbright scholar in Germany made a lot of things possible. So I feel like I had access to a lot of different things that I wouldn't have access to in the United States, whether it be archives or access to actual people. And I got to know a feel for the university system in Germany, the way it differs, the way it's similar. Also because I was on the Fulbright register, however, I was findable. So I got invited to give guest lectures. A part of my research deals with the intersection of racism, gender, and disability because in a way that's a part of feminism, because you can't talk about feminism without the intersection of class, race, and gender. So it's all connected. And I think going back to the talk of Germany's colonial history and the ideas of the modern concerns related to our bodies are so stigmatized. I think you're either too big, you're too small, you have a disability, and this idea that something is better than the other. And this is a very colonial mindset that's based on religious ideology, pseudoscience. We even see this stuff in the medical field. It's important to realize kind of where these distinctions came from. I collaborated with some graduate students at the University of Münster to organize an event for German Black-speaking authors in an exchange and a dialogue. And the idea was to have a stage where they weren't being moderated by anybody, where they got to talk to their contemporary and talk about their work. They got to ask them about their work, have a question where the focus was only on them. And I think I had never done something like that before. So that was a really interesting concept of how to organize an event. And so that was a really nice way to see just how these dialogues kind of naturally come to be. And I think obviously it was also really great to work with educators in Germany because it's a very different education system. I was a keynote speaker at at this event called Teaching the USA or Teach the USA in Rostock. It was a weekend seminar conference for German teachers who teach English. And so I talked about my research, Black German American connections in activism, literature, and culture. It was nice to see how excited people were about their work, how much they wanted to learn, how enthusiastic they were, and just their different methods. The exchanging of perspectives, it's really important to see what each country is doing differently and how we can work together, because everything is global. And when something happens here, everyone finds out about it right away. And so it's good to see what we're doing, in the US, what someone's doing in another country. I think it's important. And I think that is something that could be improved. I think a lot of people don't have the opportunity to go and work abroad, depending, maybe they have family or something. But I think the Fulbright U.S. Scholar Program was a great way to sort of bridge this or to make this connection and to allow, someone to kind of be over there and facilitate this dialogue and keep a transatlantic connection alive. I would define global learning as experiencing something outside of your field of research, outside of your comfort zone, because we often get too focused on what we do in our own little sort of bubble or in our own little echo chamber. And while it's important and while we're doing good work, I think it's really important to kind of take a step out of that to see how other disciplines are doing it, how other disciplines are handling global issues. It might not be something that you're dealing with, but I think that's really important because it can really put things in a perspective.